Hello everyone, welcome back to Fly School. I'm your instructor, Micah. I'm not a real-world pilot or instructor, so do not use the information given here and real-world aircraft to make cause harm to you or someone else. With all that being said, let's get into today's topic. I do apologize in advance. I am getting over a cold, so my voice is a little different, and I may have to take some breaks here and there to drink some water and such. But anyway, so we're going to get into this. What we're going to talk about today is taxiing and taking off. And what I mean by that, three T's, and what I mean by that is talking in an uncontrolled airport to the aircraft, the air traffic pattern, to the aircraft in the air around you or on the ground. Not talking necessarily to the ATC, because this is an uncontrolled airport, which means ATC does not control it. Some people call it a pilot controlled airport because pilots basically they work together to control the airport and the airspace around it. And then we're going to talk about taxiing to the runway, how to taxi, what you need to look out for, things you need to do up prior to actually getting onto the runway. It's called the run-up. And then once you actually get onto the runway, we're going to talk about how you're going to take off here in the Cessna 172. Every aircraft's slightly different on the way that these things work, but in general, they all have the same purpose. Excuse me, like I said, getting over a cold. Alright, so we're going to talk about, first off, what you need to do prior to taxiing, prior to moving, anything like that. First, you're going to make sure your lights are good. So let me actually, I got to click in here. There we go. And right now we're at daylight time, so I just have my beacon, taxi, and nav lights on. I don't need my landing lights at this time or anything like that. So clock sets. This is your clock right here. You just want to make sure it's the select time, the right time, and everything like that. But honestly, I don't even really bother with that since it's not really used in X-Plane in any way. Radios are set. Or I'm sorry, radios are on. So make sure your radios are on, which they are. They're all on. And ATIS check. So what does that mean, ATIS check? So ATIS is basically an automated system that gives information. So it gives you a weather brief, and then like what runways in use, or if there's any closures on taxiways, and any type of information you need to know as a pilot about the airport you're at. To do that, all you have to do is bring up any type of planner. Like I usually use SkyVector when I'm trying to find an airport and get some information from that airport. Or you can literally just type in the airport you're wanting to be at. We're at Kilos Charlie Uniform Bravo today, K-Cub, and we got some birds in the air. That's important to know. So basically all I do is I look at an airport diagram or find some airport information looking for frequencies for your radios. And I'm going to bring up one right now. This is off of SkyVector, as you can tell. Now, I know this looks like a lot of information, but what you need to key in on, since we're talking about airport communications, obviously you're going to key on the airport communications. So you'll notice Columbia approach and departure. That's not actually the aircraft we're at. And if we looked at the VFR, so this is where we're at right here. That's Columbia right there. So we're at the downtown airport. This is the main airport. And we will be in controlled airspace, but we won't get into that today. But this is a uncontrolled airport. And you could tell, obviously, first of all, if you know symbols on the airport, you know this is an uncontrolled airport. But also, if you just look at the airport communications, you can tell there's no tower or anything like that. So, what we're going to look at is important is the Unicom frequency, right there, and the ATIS frequency, which is right there. So basically, if you notice, it says 6.5 W and 10.1 East, so that's west and east. So this ATIS isn't for this particular airport. This airport doesn't have an ATIS, but over at the airports to the east and west of us, there are some ATISes, and so you can actually pick up those frequencies and use those in order to make your determination of the conditions in the area. So we'll do that. We're going to turn to 120.15, and then turn to 120.15. If we look down here at the radio console, you'll see these numbers right here. So the non-highlighted means yours is the active one. The highlighted one means it's the one you change. So if we want to change this to 120.25, I think is what it was. 120.15. What you're going to do is you're actually going to use these knobs. You'll notice the big one here changes the big numbers, right? So 120.15. So we're going to go to the small one now, and we're just going to change this down to 15 right there. Now you're going to notice something. When this right here, this basically is a channel switcher, your comm switcher, and you're going to change this from being inactive and this from being active. We're going to swap them. So this will become the active, this will become the inactive when I click this button.
Columbia Metropolitan Information, November 1800 Zulu weather. Wind calm, visibility more than 10. Sky conditions 20,000 scattered, 35,000 scattered, temperature 14, dew point -10. Altimeter 2992.
Alright, so basically,
29, departing runway 29. Advise on initial contact, you have November.
alright, so switch it off so it doesn't come back on. So it's a repeating message. You'll notice something that came on though, and we'll get into this when we talk about doing air traffic control on an actually controlled airport. I'm going to try to get somebody else on here, and we'll do a back and forth so you can kind of see how that works. But basically, that gives you some simple information for weather. Like the closest clouds to us is going to be 20,000 feet up, so we don't have to worry about clouds at all. It's going to be perfect VFR flying today. It's calm, so the winds are calm, so there's like maybe 1 to 2 miles per hour, like if that. So you really don't have to worry about the wind either, so which makes it really easy for flying. And then we're just using it as a demonstration. Now you notice it said at the end, or said, you know, have information, I think it was Oscar or whatever. That again we'll get into when we get into the actual controlled airports. But what does that information give you here? That just basically tells you what direction the wind's coming from, which is important when you're trying to take off. So as you may or may not know, aircraft always land and take off into the wind, which means the wind's coming towards you. And what you want to do is make sure that you're doing that if at all possible. Obviously you can have crosswinds, which can happen, but in general you want to try to make sure you're taking off into the wind. Since the wind's calm, we can kind of choose which way we want to take off, so we'll do that. But anyway, sorry about that, guys. Gotta cut over. That's cold. All right, so now that we've set that, we want to go back and look at that. What was the Unicom frequency here? It was 122.80. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to change now. We're going to switch it back. I know it's going to start talking, but we want to change this to 80 and switch it back. So what does that do? That now puts us on the frequency for this particular airport, or the airports in the area. So Unicom means Universal Communications, obviously Uni, right? And it's basically, there's all the uncontrolled airports in this little area are going to be on this Unicom frequency, more than likely. Sometimes you only have one on one frequency, but that's not always the case. And basically what it's going to do is you're going to hear other airport traffic, and I'll get into why it's important to make a certain type of call sign when you're doing it. But the Unicom frequencies can do more than just one airport, and it's important to know that. Alright, so we're back top of the cockpit here. And I'm going to show you, well, I guess I should show you this too. And I know I kind of messed up this the last video. This is not your altimeter, guys. That's your altimeter. This is your squawk, okay? And basically, I mean, I explained what the squawk was, but I didn't call it a squawk. I called it something else. So this is your squawk, guys. And I went back and I watched the video. I was like, why am I calling this an altimeter? It's not. It's your transponder. This is your squawk frequency. Yeah. Anyway, I wanted to cover that real fast. It's not your altimeter. I felt like an idiot when I looked back and I was like, what? Why did I say that? Obviously was not thinking. Alright. Now, what we're going to do is, now that we've checked the ATIS, is like to call it ATIS, in a normal controlled airport, you would call for clearance to taxi. We're not going to do that because we're in an uncontrolled airport, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to basically make sure that that no one's going to hit us or anything. No traffic are moving. I haven't heard any radio communications over the net, so I'm not worried about that either. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and make my call. Now my call is going to come in a certain form. So it's going to be who I am, what I'm doing. I'm sorry, who I am, where I am, and what I'm doing. That's your basic air traffic control calls. It's who I am, where I am, and what I'm doing. Now, an uncontrolled airport is slightly different. It's where I am, what I'm doing, where I am inside of that where I am, and then where I am again. Where I'm again. So what that basically it's like a sandwich, doing like think about like Oreo or a sandwich or something. It's 2 bread pieces or 2 cookies. Those are the airport designations. This is uncontrolled airport now. Remember that. So right now, what I tell you, we're at Kilo Charlie Uniform Bravo, which I'll pull this up again and you'll see. It is the Jim Hamilton L.B. Owens Airport. So what I'm going to say, I'm not going to say the whole name because that's long and that takes up time on the radio, and you don't want to take up too much time. So I'll probably just say the Jim Hamilton Airport. People will know what that is, and I might even just put the ICAO identifier as well, the Cub. So it'll be Jim Hamilton Airport, Charlie Uniform Bravo. That way that know, okay, this is exactly where they're talking about. Now people in the area probably already know, but it never hurts to be a little safe. Excuse me while I take a drink of water here. Oh man. Alright. So basically I'm going to go ahead and tell everyone I'm going to be taxiing. Now before I taxi, you always want to kind of make a plan. Again, this is a non-controlled airport, so you're not going to be assigned a taxiway or anything. So how do you know how to taxi? What taxiway you're going to use or anything like that? Well, most airports have some type of airport diagram that you can pull up. Now, this one I noticed doesn't have an airport diagram, and which I found kind of interesting. But most do, and I bet I could find one if I really looked for one. But I'm not going to worry about that too much. This only has one taxiway, if I'm not mistaken, so I'm not too worried. But basically, you want to find your airport diagram for the airport that you're going to be at to kind of make that plan of where you're going to be. Where you're gonna like taxi is what I mean. Where you're gonna be is where I'm gonna taxi, and really simply, some of the smaller airports may not even have an airport diagram just because it's not used a lot or it's not referenced or anything like that. But it is what it is, and so you're basically just gonna communicate where you're gonna taxi to. And if we look at our map here, I'll show you. Zoom in to where I am. You're going to see they already have the runway here, and this airport has one runway, right? And it's 13 and 31, right? Reverse sounds kind of cool, but anyway, 13 and 31. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it's 13 and 31. Making sure in my head, yeah, 13 and 31. I just did a 13 and 31. Anyway, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna taxi to runway 31, and that's where we're gonna do our run up and our takeoff. Now I'm gonna ask you a question: which side of the runway is 31? I'll give you a second. Think about it. That's not what I wanted. Alright, so north is this way, right? And that's 36 or 0. South is this way, which is 18. You always are going into the runway is the direction you're going, 2. So this down here would be 3-1. This up here would be 1-3. Because if you're coming in this way, your compass will be at 3-1. Coming in this way, your compass will be at 1-3. So we're going to taxi all the way down to here, which if we're looking, that's way down there. So we're going to taxi all the way down to there. And there's a reason I want to taxi down that direction instead of the opposite direction. But anyway, so we're going to make our radio call here. And I'm going to release that parking brake. All right. All right. And whenever you make a radio call, you always want to think, what am I going to say? And in this instance, what I'm basically going to say, I'll tell it to you, and then I'll do it as if I was actually making the call. Jim Hamilton Airport, Cessna 172 Sierra Papa. So what did I do? I identified where I'm at, right? So in an uncontrolled airport, you always identify where you're at first. Then I identified who I am. I'm a Cessna, and my tail number is 172 Sierra Papa. Notice I didn't use November. That's because November is basically nationwide. You're going to have November on there. So it's just leave that off. Then I'm going to announce what I'm going to be doing. Taxiing to runway 31. Takeoff, remain in pattern. Now, there's a couple ways you can say stuff, but basically just want to make sure you're clear here. So what I've just said is I'm taxiing to runway 31. And I went ahead and announced that I'm going to be remaining in the pattern here at the airport. That way, if anyone's listening onto this Unicom frequency, they know, okay, this guy is starting his taxi. He's going to be doing some touch and goes or something like that. They can already go ahead and start planning if they're coming in. They're having to, they're going to be entering the pattern or what have you. Then I'm going to end that. Remember the sandwich method. I'm going to end that with another call saying Jim Hamilton Airport. Why did I end it there? Because maybe someone turned in halfway through and they heard me saying taxiing to runway 31 for takeoff, remain in pattern, and they're like, what airport? So they're giving that identifier again saying, Jim Hamilton Airport. And you're also making sure they know that they're on the right frequency, because sometimes that can happen. But anyway, so I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and make my taxi now to runway 31 after I make this radio call. Jim Hamilton Airport, Cessna 172 Sierra Papa, taxiing to runway 31, remain in pattern. Jim Hamilton Airport. Almost forgot to end it right there on the Jim Hamilton Airport, but I remembered at the last second to always bracket. I'm used to flying at controlled airports, honestly, more than anything else, and that's just because normally where I fly in the X-Plane 11. But anyway, as we're taxiing, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys a couple things you want to do while you're taxiing. First, you want to go and check your brakes to make sure they work, which they do, so we're good there. We want to make sure that the turn and slip indicator is correctly indicating. So if I just wiggle myself back and forth, you'll notice that ball in there is going back and forth, which is important. You want to make sure that happens, and that's the turn indicators indicating correctly as well. You just want to kind of do your so there's a method. I didn't cover this in the last one, but when you're actually flying the aircraft, there's a couple of methods of scanning your instruments, and this is kind of more IFR, but it's good for VFR too. You have your T method, so your T method is looking at top, then down, or your wheel method, which means you're going like this. Okay, your wagon wheel. I usually use the wagon wheel method, but you can use whichever method you think is most useful for you. And so basically, I'm just doing that real fast and making sure all my instruments are at least appear to be working and are accurate. Now you'll notice you want to make sure your compass here is equal with this down here, and it looks like it's about right because obviously you can see this a little better. So I usually just make sure that again, because you can change it here, you want to make sure it's the same. But anyway, we're about to get close to our run up here. We'll do our run up, and then we'll make another radio call upon entering the actual runway, saying that you're going to be taking off. So and we'll get there in just a second and what you want to say there. We'll make just a second, we'll make our run up. Alright, unfortunately this airport doesn't have a run-up ramp, so some airports have actual ramps like off to the side to do your run-ups. We're going to hold short here, and we're going to do what we call the run-up. So I have brakes full applied right now, and what I'm going to do is looking at my tachometer, which is my RPMs, right? I'm going to check it to make sure that first and foremost that my magnetos are working correctly. So I'm going to push this up to about 1600 RPMs. That's 1700. That'll work fine. Now I'm going to switch this to my left magneto. I see that drop. That's normal. Now if I switch to my right, it shouldn't change. But if hit both, it should go back up, which is correct, and that's what you want. I'm going to turn my landing lights on, taxi off. Go ahead and reduce that throttle back down to about 1000 RPMs here. 1000 to 1200 is what you're looking for. Alright. Make sure that we're going to turn our fuel pump on for takeoff. Make sure our elevator trim is set to takeoff, which it looks like it is. We're not going to worry about pilot heat. It's a warm day outside today. Radios are set. We've already done that. And transponder. Now we're going to switch this to alternate. Or ALT, not alternate. We're going to make our call for takeoff here. Alright, so to do that, again, sandwich method applies. So, Jim Hamilton Airport, Cessna 172, Sierra Papa, taking off runway 31, remain in pattern, Jim Hamilton Airport. Again, making that sandwich call. That way everyone knows exactly where I'm at and what I'm doing. And again, announcing that I'm going to be remaining in pattern. So we're going to get lined up here. Now, I'm going to stop here for a second. Well, I'm going to first get lined up because I'm not lined up. And I'm going to talk through taking off. Again, there's no air traffic in the pattern. I'm not worried about staying on the runway for a second here. Alright, so let's talk about taking off real fast. There's different types of takeoffs. You have short field takeoffs. You have normal takeoffs. And we're going to cover just a normal takeoff. It's not a short field takeoff. We'll cover short field takeoffs and landings later. We're just going to cover today just regular takeoffs. So I'm not going to apply any flaps. And what I'm looking for a rotate speed at about 65 to 70 knots. Okay, and what a rotate speed means is when I actually lift those wheels of my aircraft off the runway and get into the sky. That's what I'm looking for when I say rotate speed. The VR that's referenced to. Okay, now on the climb out, which we will also cover, it's important you're shooting for 74 knots. Now I know some people are like, it should be like 80, it should be 76 or so. By definition, by regulation, the Cessna 172, its takeoff target speed should be 74 knots. However, I understand if you're going 76, 77, it's going to be okay. Even if you're going 80, it's going to be okay. And important to know also, you're pitching for airspeed and you're throttling for altitude. Thinking for a second, well, don't you, if you push down, you go down, and pull up, you go up? Yes, but that's how you should be controlling your airspeed. Your throttle should be controlling how fast you're going up or down, or if you're going up and down. And the reason that is because when you're flying a straight and level, right, your nose should be straight, right, level, and your altitude should not be increasing or decreasing. Now, what I want you to do is, after I show you this, I want you to get on an X-plane, I want you to fly some, practice this, and I want you to take off. I want you to try to fly straight and level, keeping your nose straight, your wings level, but keeping your throttle 100%. I want you to tell me what happens. A couple things are going to happen. Your airspeed's going to go up, and you're going to climb. Just because you're straight doesn't mean you're level. So keep that in mind. Your throttle controls your altitude. Your speed is controlled by your pitch. Now, let's go ahead and take off here. Now, when I take off, I'm going to have to apply some right rudder. Why? Because the centrifugal force of the engine is pushing me to the left. this propeller spinning, which means the torque of the engine is going to push me off to the left, which I'm going to have to keep in mind, especially when I lift off the ground, because I'm going to have to release that right rudder some, because if I don't, I'm actually going to climb off of the runway and not stay straight. And that's very important when you're doing a pattern, to take off and take off straight. So it's difficult to master. I had to practice it quite a bit of times, and I'm still not perfect. Now, one thing I would like you to also note, because this is going to become important when you're doing patterns, notice that you're taking off, and we're actually perfectly on 3-1 right now. 3-1-0. That's important when you're doing your patterns, because you're going to have to make some 90-degree turns, and it's important to know where you started from. And it'll also help you when you're up in the air to make sure you're not drifting to the left or the right of the runway when you're taking off. So what we're going to do here is we're going to release our parking brake. We're going to gradually, in about 3 seconds, we're going to increase this power. At the same time, I'm adding a little bit of right rudder just to keep me level straight on. Now, I'm also going to apply a little bit of force down on the yoke to keep me from taking off beforehand, because it'll want to take off just a little bit before the target speed here. So we're just going to let go now, and we're going to pull back, and we're going to fly up into the air. That simple. Again, we're pitching for speed, so I'm going to pitch my aircraft till I get the speed I want, and I'll control my altitude with my throttle. But that's pretty much how you take off. It's not that difficult. It is by far one of the easiest procedures. Once you get that, the big thing is getting that rudder down to make sure you're not, drifting or anything like that. But yeah, so that's basically how you take off. Pretty simple. Hope this helped. I know I'm not perfect. I know I probably screwed up on some of the things, but just know that this is something you do. Now, understand once you clear the runway, you're going to make one final call, and that's going to, especially if there's other people in the traffic pattern. And basically, what you're going to say is you're going to say, Jim Hamilton Airport, Cessna 172 Sierra Papa, clear the runway. Jim Hamilton Airport. That way, they know. Okay, if someone's coming in on final, they know, okay, these clear the runway, I can go ahead and move in now, and we'll be good to go. But anyway, guys, just know that, and if no one's in there, you can always just, you don't have to worry necessarily make that call, but I always suggest making it just in case. Then also, when we're getting to the patterns and what you do with the calls and the patterns, but I hope this helped you guys out some. If not, well, I'm sorry I wasted your time. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below, and I do apologize again for my cold. I'm still trying to get over it. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.